the next phase of U.S.-Russian relations.
Andrew Weiss with RAND Center. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thanks so much for having me.
That does it for today's Washington Journal. The House begins its morning session now. Live coverage here on C-SPAN. Thanks for watching.
Rooms, Washington, D.C., March 6, 2012. I hereby appoint the Honorable Lynn Jenkins to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, John A. Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 17, 2012, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with each party limited to 1 hour, and each member other than the majority and minority leaders and the minority whip limited to 5 minutes each, but in no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Recently, there have been a series of very powerful articles in the popular press about what we call end of life. The most recent was by Dr. Ken Murray in the Wall Street Journal last week, entitled "Why Doctors Die Differently." Now, these series of articles focus in on this end-of-life period, usually the most intense, the most painful, the most expensive. It's too often confusing for patients and their families. Too often we find that people don't get the care they want and they need. This has been a passion of mine for years now, to make sure that families and patients are equipped to deal with the end of life. That was my legislation that was in the health care reform that was unfortunately not in the final legislation because the reconciliation process wouldn't allow the Senate to consider it in the House bill. We're working on it again with legislation entitled Personalize Your Health Care, H.R. 1589, to make sure that these provisions that are strongly supported by the public finally become law. I think perhaps the best case that I have seen for this legislation is found by Dr. Murray in his article, Why Doctors Die Differently. It is a simple, powerful two-page statement explaining the hows and whys. Doctors actually do pass away, but they pass away differently. What is interesting is that these well-off, connected to the medical care profession, it's not how much health care they get in their final months, but actually how little. They do have more information than the average member of the public. They know their choices, and they act to make sure that their choices are respected. Doctors are more than 3 times likely than the average member of the public to have an advance directive that instructs families, doctors, hospitals, how they want to be treated. And that percentage is even higher for older doctors. They know, for instance, in their last moment, most doctors don't want CPR performed on them. They know that unlike television, where 75% of the CPR instances that the American public watches are successful and patients go on to lead happy, normal lives, they know that after the ribs are broken, which is what happens in normally in CPR that's done properly, that less than 8% live even another month. Doctors understand the facts. They tell their families. It's probably not accurate to say they get less care, but what is accurate is they get different care. They're more likely to use hospice services. They're more likely to have palliative care to make sure that their final moments, they're not in pain, that they're less likely to have invasive, painful, expensive treatment, particularly if they don't want it, because they've taken care of making sure that their wishes are known and respected. Now, I don't want everybody to, quote, die like a doctor, but I do want everybody to have the knowledge and the power that their wishes, whatever they are respected. It's time that Congress pass legislation to make sure the American public has the information and that their wishes, whatever their wishes may be, are respected. Because those final months or weeks or days deserve to be gentle, thoughtful, respectful, and people having what they and their families want. I strongly urge my colleagues to look at H.R. 1589, personalize your health care.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Jones, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. Last week, Congresswoman Barbara Lee and myself asked for a classified briefing on Afghanistan. And really, the only thing I can say about the briefing, because it was classified, is that I will continue to come to the floor and say, let's bring our troops home from Afghanistan. Last week, we had two Army officers from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, who were in Afghanistan to train, and they were shot by the trainee, the Afghan trainee, at point-blank range. This brings to 42 Americans who have been killed in Afghanistan while working with the Afghans to train them to be police and soldiers. The coalition troops, when you factor in how many coalition troops along with the Americans have been killed, it's about 70. It is a totally impossible situation, and the fact that we continue to spend $10 billion a month. And I have beside me, Mr. Speaker, a poster from the Greensboro News-Record in Greensboro, North Carolina, and the headlines is "Get Out," and there's a honor guard bringing a transfer case off the plane. And Mr. Speaker, the sad thing is the date is Sunday, February of 2011. I think we're in 2012 now, March of 2012. We continue to spend money that we cannot even account for. We send auditors to Afghanistan to try to account for the $10 billion a month that is being given to Mr. Karzai so he can lead Afghanistan, buy some new robes and caps, I guess. And our troops are losing their legs, their arms, and their life in a war that should be ended now, not later. We will, during the debate on the DOD bill in May, continue to try to bring amendments to the floor to bring some sanity to this involvement in Afghanistan. As I've mentioned many times, a former Marine Commandant has been my advisor on Afghanistan, and he continues to talk about the fact that we are wearing out our military, the equipment, our manpower, and yet there is a threat growing in the Pacific that we seem not to pay any attention to. Recently, Jim McGovern and I and John Gary Mendy and some others, we met with Colonel Danny Davis, Lieutenant Colonel. He is a active duty reservist who's been to Afghanistan, returned just a couple of months ago. He's been over there for almost 10 months. And he has written articles saying that the Congress, in these hearings with the military leadership, we're not getting the straight talk that we need to hear. Too many times they use the word, well, the training of the Afghans is going pretty well, but it's fragile. It's real fragile. Well, I'd like to say it's real fragile. No, it's even worse than that. You cannot predict what is going to happen in the country of Afghanistan. We actually had two Marines from my district, Camp Lejeune, Marine bases in the 3rd District that I represent, that were over there about 3 months ago, a Sergeant Baldiff and a Colonel Palmer being from Cherry Point Marine Air Station and Baldiff from Camp Lejeune. They also, like these two Army officers, they were training Afghans, and they were having dinner with the Afghan trainees, and that night one of the trainees stood up and shot and killed both of them. I mean, this is not fair to the American soldier, Marine, Airman, Navy, whatever, to continue to be in Afghanistan 11 years after it started. And money that we're going to cut here in America of the senior citizens and the children who need programs to have a better quality of life, we're going to cut their programs, but we're going to keep spending $10 billion a month in Afghanistan. It makes no sense. Mr. Speaker, before I close, I would like to encourage every member of Congress who has the authority, should they want to implement that authority, to read the National Intelligence Estimate on Afghanistan that was published in 2011. It is classified, but every member of Congress can take 1 hour, it's about 55 pages, I've read it, and read it. You need to read it. And then maybe you can help us make better decisions here on the floor about what in the world are we doing in Afghanistan, spending Uncle Sam's money that he doesn't even have. He has to borrow his money from the Chinese to pay Karzai. Where does that make any sense? The American people do not think it makes any sense. We did a teletown hall about a month ago, and 66% of thousands of people that were on that call said, bring our troops home now. Now, I realize that's the 3rd District of North Carolina, the home of Camp Lejeune, Cherry Point Marine Air Station, and New River. Madam Speaker, I do want to close by asking God to please bless our men and women in uniform and ask God to continue to bless America. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Donnelly, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I rise to pay tribute to John Oliver, an outstanding American citizen who has shown commitment and service to his hometown of Plymouth, Indiana, our state, and our country. A native of Newcastle in the United Kingdom, 50 years ago this month, John immigrated to the United States on March 19, 1962, when he was only 19. In 1975, he officially became a United States citizen. He is a dear friend not only to me, but to people all around the country and around the world. He began his journey in the manufacturing industry as a laborer for a small research and development firm. He moved to Plymouth, Indiana to work for that company, ultimately becoming its president in 1977. 9 years later, John purchased the company and renamed it U.S. Granules, which today produces 50% of the world's granulated aluminum. With his leadership, U.S. Granules remains a leader in technology and in quality, and they have established customers on 5 different continents. John's heart and soul, though, is with his family, his friends, and his service to his community. He has been a pillar of support for the children of Plymouth. Quietly and without recognition, John endowed a fund to benefit the Plymouth High School speech team, a state leader in debate competition. To further advance the strength of local schools, John has made donation after donation to help with the purchase of books for school libraries, leadership seminars for students, and the expansion of scholarship and other award programs. In addition, John maintains an intern program at U.S. Granules, and it provides work experience and scholarship assistance, and a chance for our children to succeed and for their dreams to come true. John has also been a supporter of youth baseball, in particular American Legion Post 27, and he has also extended his support to the Indiana Baseball Hall of Fame. And when he was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 2009, he humbly, as he always did, reminded everyone that his contributions were dedicated to his community's youth and to their future, and that it was not about him. John has also been an active board member of the St. Joseph Regional Medical Center, where his work has helped provide vital health care for an entire region. He is a former director of the Indiana Manufacturing Association, the Marshall County Industrial Association, and the Plymouth Industrial Development Company. He has served as fundraising drive chairman for the Marshall County United Way and the Plymouth Emergency Vehicle Fund. And John has also served in the United States Army Reserves. He exemplifies the promise and the spirit of America, that with hard work, determination, and love of country, you can accomplish anything. On behalf of the citizens of Indiana, I would like to salute John's character, his personal achievements, and his contributions to our community. We are very lucky to have been touched by you, John, and for our lives to have been changed by you. Happy 50th anniversary as an American citizen. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Request unanimous consent to address the House for 5 minutes and revise and extend.
Without exception.
Madam Speaker, today, right now in America, around the dining room tables at home, there's two topics of discussion that I have to think are most pressing during that dinner conversation, and that is unemployment and price at the pumps. And frankly, they're both related very closely. Madam Speaker, before being appointed to office, President Obama's Energy Secretary Stephen Chu stated, "Somehow we have to figure out how to boost the price of gasoline to the levels in Europe." Well, Madam Speaker, at the time of that statement, gasoline prices in Europe were $8 to $10 a gallon. Now, last week, the Energy Secretary made headlines when he seemed to say the administration's goal was not to lower gas prices. Now, considering the goal is not to lower gas prices, this may be the first time that the administration's energy policies matches its rhetoric. Now, despite the President's rhetoric about the need for increased domestic production of fossil fuels, to date, this administration has seemingly done everything it can to block production. But the purpose of these remarks is to highlight not the administration's statements, but instead their policies. Let's look at the record, starting with some positive things that happened just before President Obama took office and continuing through 2012 to present day, as shown on this graph. First of all, in July of 2008, at the peak of the 2008 gas price spike, President George Bush removed 18 years of presidential executive orders restricting offshore oil and gas energy development. Prices began to fall immediately, almost overnight, given the fact that not one additional barrel of oil was drilled, but it was a message to the market, a strong message to the market that America finally recognized that the American taxpayers owned assets in oil and was willing to use them. What a message to the market would be today, a similar message. But back in 2008, that's where we saw this drop begin to start. Now, in September 2008, just a couple months later, Congress finally followed after its 26-year ban on offshore drilling to allow that to expire. And prices at the pump, as you can see, Madam Speaker, dropped dramatically even more. Then President Obama took office. February 2009, soon after, not long after inauguration. The administration rescinded oil shale lease plans put in place during the Bush administration to aid the production of oil on U.S. government lands. These are lands that are owned by federal taxpayers. President Obama's actions reduced production of oil in the United States government lands. And we see what continues to happen with prices. In June of 2010, the House Democrats passed a cap-and-trade national energy tax, which would have dramatically increased gasoline prices. In November 2009, the administration unilaterally shortened lease terms on some Outer Continental Shelf leases. Well, this policy not only discouraged oil and natural gas production, but also decreased much-needed government revenues. In March of 2010, the administration canceled the remaining lease sales and seas off the Alaska coast, eliminating development of reserves that the government estimates could be as large as 65 billion barrels of oil. In May of 2010, the administration canceled the Virginia offshore lease sale, which had bipartisan support from the Virginia governor and the Virginia congressional delegation. The administration also canceled the remaining 2010 Gulf of Mexico lease sales. In December 2010, the administration extended the moratorium on leasing off the Atlantic and eastern Gulf of Mexico through 2017. In January 2012, President Obama rejected the Keystone XL pipeline. Estimates show that the Keystone XL pipeline would add 1.1 million barrels a day of friendly Canadian oil to our Gulf of Mexico refineries. Now, Madam Speaker, moving forward with a credible energy policy can only be achieved if we all have a shared understanding of the facts. Global demand for oil is increasingly driven by developing economies such as China and India. In the U.S., our demand is down 6% year after year, and prices are still skyrocketing, and it's going to stay that way. 85% of the world's energy consumption comes from hydrocarbons, oil, coal, and natural gas. While renewable energy is needed and new consumption efficiency should be encouraged to meet future energy demands, hydrocarbons will be the dominant source of fuel for the world's economy for many decades to come. No one can deny that before we can create an energy supply that is substantially more diversified, we're going to need more fossil fuels to get us there. Unfortunately, this administration is preventing the U.S. from developing additional energy supplies to meet our demand, and as a result, families are struggling with rising energy costs and higher gas prices at the pump. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen, for 5 minutes. Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I came here to speak about a topic which I will address shortly, but I couldn't not take the moment to reflect on the passing of a great man who served in this chamber since 1989, Representative Donald Payne of New Jersey, who passed away this morning. Representative Payne sat in this section, was a quiet, bright, courageous man who I had the good fortune to travel at the request of and sponsorship of CARE and the Gates Foundation to Rwanda and to the Congo last August. He cared about children greatly. He cared about education. He cared about people, and was very upset some years back when Don Imus, the radio shock jock, said some wrongful things about the Rutgers women's basketball team that cost Mr. Imus his position. And that brings me to what I was going to speak about today. Yesterday I mentioned that I slept well on my sleep number bed. And I slept well on my sleep number bed last night because they canceled their advertising on the Rush Limbaugh show. I mentioned that advertisers are accessories to the crime when radio people go too far and destroy someone's character or try to and make libelous statements. Limbaugh did that when he called Sandra Fluck some names, said she did some things or whatever that were wrong and totally wrong. 11 advertisers have pulled their advertising because they don't want to in the future be accessories to such conduct. And talk radio has gone way over the top in this country in doing anything for ratings and money. It came to my attention that 2 radio stations have dropped Rush Limbaugh. And it's not just advertisers, but it's radio stations that are accessories to the fact of this type of crime. And it's not like we don't know it's coming because it's been out there for people to see for years, and they've sat by as this type of lies and hateful speech and wrongful speech has taken place on the radio. Rush Limbaugh being the main violator of people's rights. I decided last night in my elections to come, and I've got a primary and a general, and I've always bought billboard advertising, and Clear Channel almost has a monopoly in my city on billboards, and they have Rush Limbaugh on their network, that until they drop Rush Limbaugh, I'm not going to buy billboards for my campaign. I'm also going to discontinue radio advertising on Clear Channel, which I've done in the past. It might hurt me a little bit politically, but it's the right thing to do. That type of conduct should not be advanced on the airwaves that are supposed to be for the public good. It's interesting to note that Don Imus's comments were about women and Rush Limbaugh's comments are about women. And it seems to be fair game sometimes for men on radio to take on women and cast aspersions. Don Imus learned his lesson, and he said that Rush Limbaugh's apology was inadequate and weak and cowardly, and indeed it was. He hasn't called the lady.
He hasn't come to Georgetown University and made amends to all those women who impugned their character in his misogynist statements. And he hasn't given a proper apology. He said he used inappropriate words. He was on an inappropriate topic. And Mitt Romney certainly didn't rise to the occasion when he said they weren't the words he would have used. It wasn't an area that anybody should have brought up or even thought about. Limbaugh said that the woman wanted to be paid for sex because she, in his thoughts, wanted contraception so she could have sex without the fear of pregnancy. But it's funny, Rush Limbaugh never questioned anybody getting a vasectomy. For what's the use of a vasectomy that's covered by insurance, but to have sex without the fear or possibility of pregnancy? He said because she wanted sex paid for by the taxpayers, that he ought to be able to watch it. Well, I wonder if he wants to watch all the men who had vasectomies have their sex. There's something wrong in the country, and the advertisers and the radio stations are responsible. And they need to take appropriate moral and ethical action and not continue to be accessories to the fact and support such trash. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Florida, Mrs. Adams, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have come to the floor today to speak about the continuing Iranian threat to the United States and Israel. Just as the President of Iran continues to spew his vile poison into the civil discourse of the United Nations, the regime of the Ayatollah issued a threat of violent aggression 2 weeks ago against Israel through the Deputy Head of Armed Forces. Through its actions, Iran has proven that it will never work with the peaceful nations of the world community. In fact, in yet another affront to diplomacy, Iran recently offered to allow inspectors from the IAEA into the country, only to refuse them entry into the most important facilities to examine those nuclear sites in dispute. The threat of a nuclear-armed Iran is not only a threat to Israel, it is also a direct threat to the United States and to the entire world community. Just this week, the chief of the International Atomic Energy Agency said there were unspecified activities at an Iranian military site which inspectors wanted to visit. The Iranian regime has publicly threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz, a major shipping route for Middle Eastern nations to export oil and supply the world's energy needs. This threat by Iran amounts to economic warfare, as the closure of the Strait of Hormuz would trigger spikes in crude oil, gasoline bottlenecks in the supply chain, increased prices for all manufactured goods, and would likely lead to massive increases for gas here in the United States. At a time when our domestic economy is struggling to recover, the last thing hard-working Americans need is for gas prices to soar even higher. While drastic reductions in the supply of crude oil would be devastating to the world economy, the threat of a theocratic, unstable Iranian regime bent on the destruction of Israel and its allies is even worse. A nuclear Iran will not care about economic sanctions. A nuclear Iran will not care about diplomacy. A nuclear Iran will not negotiate in good faith. And a nuclear Iran will not be a friend of the United States. Perhaps the greatest threat to peace and security in the world is the refusal to heed the warnings of the most violent and dangerous regimes when they tell us what their exact intentions are. My hope is that it will not be a mistake of this nation, one that this nation makes with this regime in Tehran. Again, my hope is that it will not be our mistake not to pay attention to the signals from the regime in Tehran. Madam Speaker, thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Puerto Rico, Mr. Pierre Loizy, for 5 minutes. Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I rise to discuss a subject of great importance to me, to the people I represent, and to many of our fellow citizens around the country, and that is the health of nearly 10,000 residents of Vieques, Puerto Rico. The people of Vieques sacrificed as much, if not more, than any other U.S. civilian population to advance our military readiness. In the 1940s, the federal government expropriated lands on Vieques for use by the Navy. For over 60 years, the Navy conducted training operations on eastern Vieques, including ship-to-shore bombing, aerial bombing, and ground-based exercises. The Navy has reported that it dropped between 3 and 4 million pounds of ordnance on Vieques each year between 1983 and 1998. Training operations on Vieques ceased in 2003, in part due to concerns about the risks to safety, health, and the environment posed by decades of weapons use. The Navy is now administering the cleanup of Vieques with support from other federal and local agencies. In 2005, the EPA listed Vieques as one of the most hazardous sites in the U.S. To date, over 35,000 munitions on Vieques have been recovered and destroyed, and including at least 19,000 live munitions. Unfortunately, numerous studies have shown the residents of Vieques have higher rates of cancer and other chronic illnesses than residents of mainland Puerto Rico, raising serious questions about whether there may be a link between those health problems and the island's long use as a military training range. In December, the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, an agency within HHS, released a draft report that addresses whether there is evidence of causal relationship between the identified health problems and the Navy's activities. ATSDR examined 5 pathways through which residents of Vieques might have been exposed to harmful contaminants: air, soil, fish, local produce and livestock, and drinking water. The conclusion reached by ATSDR in its draft report is generally the same as the conclusion reached by the agency in a series of controversial public health assessments it conducted on Vieques about a decade ago. Specifically, that the available data does not establish that the contaminants in these pathways, some of which can be linked to military activities, were at levels expected to cause the reported health problems. Because the draft report leaves many crucial questions unanswered, today I'm filing extensive comments that I urge ATSDR to address before its report is finalized. My comments are intended to be constructive because my constituents deserve a meticulous evaluation of the draft report aimed at producing concrete action by the federal government. In my comments, I note that ATSDR repeatedly acknowledges that its conclusions are not definitive or even close to it, because the available data upon which the agency relies is incomplete in many respects. While ATSDR recommends that further studies be conducted to fill certain data gaps, the agency does not go far enough. In 2009, ATSDR stated that it expected to recommend biomonitoring to determine whether and to what extent residents have been exposed to harmful chemicals. Yet, in a startling reversal, the agency has now stated it is not recommending a comprehensive, systematic biomonitoring effort at this time. Given the health problems on Vieques and the potential link between those problems and military activities, such an action is misplaced. Therefore, I have urged ATSDR to recommend a comprehensive biomonitoring investigation. More generally, I have encouraged ATSDR and other federal agencies working in partnership with independent researchers to take a more active and assertive role in designing, implementing, and especially funding the additional studies that are still needed to determine the nature and potential causes of the health problems being experienced by residents of Vieques. It is unacceptable that more than a decade after ATSDR completed its first public health assessments on Vieques, fundamental questions about the safety of the island's environment and the health of its residents remain unanswered. My constituents deserve better. I yield back, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Stivers, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I request permission to address the House for 5 minutes, providing next to my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've served for 26 years in the Ohio Army National Guard and had the pleasure of serving with many brave men and women over the years, including a tour of duty in Operation Iraqi Freedom. As a member of the Armed Services, as well as a member of Congress, I was shocked and horrified last year by reports of the Dover Air Force Base mortuary sending veterans' remains to the Prince George landfill.
The Washington Post reported on December 7, 2011, that they uncovered 976 fragments from 274 service members that were cremated, incinerated, and taken to landfills between 2004 and 2008. This is an outrage. It disrespects our men and women in uniform, and it can't be allowed to stand. The first steps to fixing this is creating a proper memorial for those who've served our country so well and given their last measure of devotion. I'm working on legislation to create a Tomb of the Unknowns at Arlington National Cemetery for every conflict moving forward. This plan will be paid for by taking money from the Air Force, because that's where the poor decisions were made. I plan to introduce this legislation very soon. To those who've given their final measure of devotion in service to our country, they deserve a final resting place worthy of their dedication, commitment, and devotion, and we need to give that to them. God bless the United States of America, and thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Richardson, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 5 minutes and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
In this month of March, as we celebrate Women's History Month, I would like to take a moment to recognize some of our great female leaders who throughout history have persevered in the face of monumental opposition and successfully have accomplished great things on behalf of the American people. From the words of the great poet Maya Angelou, from the beautiful singing voice of Marian Anderson, from the tireless activism of Dolores Huerta, to the groundbreaking leadership of Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Secretary of Labor Frances Perkins, and of course our own Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi. These women and many more have played an integral role in our history in this nation. Madam Speaker, every day women take great strides to help others and to improve the quality of life for everyone. Unfortunately, in matters involving health care, women are still facing these challenges. Whether it's on the Senate floor last week during a debate on the Blunt Amendment, or whether it's during a House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform hearing, where women continue to face unwarranted attacks on their reproductive health rights and their access to contraceptives. More disconcerting, these debates and failed attacks have escalated beyond misguided attempts to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Now they've taken aim at restricting women's choices in the area of reproductive health altogether. This is wrong. Medical decisions about a woman's health must leave the political arena and be left to the discretion of the patient and their doctor, not employers, and certainly not the government. It is astonishing and disappointing that more than 50 years after the landmark Supreme Court decision in Griswold versus Connecticut, a decision which found that women have a constitutional right to use contraceptives, these attacks on the women's right of privacy and health care still persist at an alarming rate. The American people want us to work towards addressing their top priority, creating jobs, not their reproductive rights. However, this Congress seems to be more focused on bringing forward legislation that targets women's access to basic health care. In this Congress alone, we've taken 8 votes on anti-women health legislation. A 2011 Guttmacher Institute study found that over 90% of the women, over 90% of Catholic women between the ages of 15 and 44 have used some sort of birth control at some point during their lives. Birth control can cost up to $600 a year, so for a college student, a woman who's had multiple children and is still in childbearing years, low-income women, or those who are underinsured, insurance coverage means the difference between accessing contraceptive services or not. Quite simply, Madam Speaker, all women should have the choice and access to contraception and have the resources no matter where they work, where they live, or where they go to college. This is why I'm proud to support President Obama's Affordable Care Act, which I voted on, which will make a positive impact on women and children and their access to health care, and greatly decrease the number of women and their families who are uninsured or underinsured. Studies have shown that women who have health insurance don't always receive the medical care they need because their policies don't cover certain services, or the women simply can't afford the high deductibles and co-payments. The Affordable Care Act changes this unfortunate reality by assisting women in gaining access to basic preventative health care in order to prevent life-threatening diseases in the future. Our country is facing great challenges. People need jobs. Students need affordable education. Seniors and working families need affordable health care. But one thing we don't need is to continue to waste time debating extreme legislation that is dangerous to women's health, disrespects the judgment of American women, and is nothing less than most a comprehensive, radical assault on women's health in our lifetime. Madam Speaker, as people all over America pay tribute during the month of March to generations of women who've committed to progress and have proved invaluable assets to our society, let us in Congress renew our commitment to support women, not with certificates at banquets, by working to ensure equal treatment of all women in society, by providing women with equal access to health care and protect women's rights and their families to choose once and for all their own health care. Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Young, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 5 minutes or advisement from members.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I rise today because I've never been prouder to call southern Indiana home. Late Friday afternoon in our part of America, a disaster brought neighbors together, turned strangers into friends, and reminded us all what it means to be part of a community. Over the course of several hours, fierce winds, softball-sized hail, and deadly tornadoes descended upon southern Indiana communities, leaving behind a 50-mile path of destruction from New Pekin to Chelsea and beyond. Our people are still assessing the cost, but we know this much. 13 Hoosiers have died, scores have lost their homes and businesses, and citizens across the region have suffered untold of damage to personal and public property. As hard as it is to imagine, the tragedy might have been worse were it not for the bravery and resilience of rank-and-file Hoosiers. Our firemen, policemen, EMTs, and local officials deserve our thanks. Those who serve in Indiana's National Guard, our state police, and our Department of Homeland Security stepped up too. From the initial response through the ongoing efforts today, their service has been exemplary. But it's been concerned citizens, so-called ordinary Americans, who have restored a measure of stability to a region pummeled by forces beyond our control. There was the bus driver in Henryville who, in the nick of time, rushed dozens of children back to school to protect them from the approaching twister. There were the EMTs off Interstate 65 who saw a woman thrown from her car and saved her from being pummeled by hail by dragging a large metal sign across the road and holding it over her. They likely saved her life. There were parents and friends and even strangers across southern Indiana who, as danger approached, took a moment to extend a hand to others and said, "Come inside. We'll find room." After the storms left their mark, Hoosiers immediately turned to accounting for loved ones and comforting neighbors. The damage was and is severe. One tornado, by some accounts a half-mile wide, carved a clear path through southern Indiana, ripping trees out of the earth, hurling automobiles and combines long distances, severing power lines, and decimating countless homes and businesses. Here again, Hoosiers didn't sit around and wait for others to help us out. We got to work. Now, over the weekend, I spent time surveying the damage and meeting with those who lost most. Everywhere I visited, I met citizens wearing work boots, work gloves, who were busily beginning to sort through the piles of rubble. I met others who had fired up their chainsaws and were clearing debris from the roadways. I saw clusters of cars and pickup trucks parked outside homes that were hit hardest. In the aftermath of such a tragedy, one would be forgiven for asking, "Why me?" But I never heard it. Instead, time and again, I heard Hoosiers sympathize with those who lost more than they. And more than one person told me that in the end, stuff doesn't really matter. It's people that are important. And I heard sincere, caring people ask their neighbors, how can I help? In Henryville, a pizza shop was mostly destroyed, except for the freezer. The couple who owned it, rather than worrying about the loss of their business, asked officials how they could donate food from the freezer to those who needed it most. In Marysville, the local Christian church remains intact, but little else. Pastor Bob Priest told me their decades-old building is no longer structurally sound, but the congregation has never been stronger. For those of us who've seen the scale and scope of destruction up close, we know the path back will not be easy, but we will fix all that Mother Nature broke. And government at all levels will and must be there to help, from local authorities to the state of Indiana to our congressional offices. My staff and I in particular are eager to connect our constituents to whatever federal services and funds might be available to help them get their lives back on track. But make no mistake, it will be the people of Indiana, the people of tight-knit communities like Henrysville, Marysville, Chelsea, and New Pekin who will rebuild their broken lives. Now, during these tough times, Hoosiers are reminding us what it means to be a community of citizens. One nation, under God, indivisible, come what may. That sense of community has always bound Americans together in tough times, and it will get us through this tragedy as well. May God be with those Americans who are putting their lives back together. We're praying for you and here for you. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last month, the House Republican leadership commemorated Valentine's Day by planning a shotgun wedding between transportation reauthorization and the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, between highway funding and federal pension cuts. Many members of this House spoke for and against this troubling bill, but I think it's time Congress started listening to the people. Consider what my constituents wrote me when they asked me to oppose this transportation disinvestment plan. One concerned constituent in Vienna said, I'm writing to urge you not to support the proposed American Energy and Infrastructure Jobs Act. This bill is anti-jobs, anti-business, anti-transit, and anti-environment. It slashes funding for transit, guts our nation's environmental laws, and green lights a set of controversial and damaging new drilling projects, including in Anwar. The director of a nonprofit in Dumfries, Virginia, worried about the utter lack of transit support in the proposed legislation. He wrote, I can tell you from firsthand experience that this proposal would have a profoundly negative impact on our ability for clients to go about their daily lives. Many clients use public transportation to access our services and seek and hold employment because it allows them to remain independent. This bill puts jobs and services the agency provides to valuable populations at serious risk. A constituent from Prince William County bemoaned the dearth of transit investments and commented for nearly 30 years, beginning with President Reagan, a portion of federal motor fuels tax revenues has been dedicated to public transportation investment under federal law. These revenues are a dependable and predictable source of funding and should remain dedicated to public transportation. The House Ways and Means Plan eliminates this reliable funding source and provides no funding for public transportation after 2016. A senior citizen from Springfield, Virginia, worried about the impact of this legislation on alternative transportation options. He said, I strongly encourage you to vote no on H.R. 7. I'm 65 years old and have spent the last 10 years of my life utilizing paths and trails around Fairfax County and this area of the country for safe biking and exercising. Their existence has been critical to my efforts to improve my personal health. These trails cost so little compared to building highways and bridges and using automobiles and have tremendous benefits for all of us. Please don't allow this bill to halt the great progress this country has made in its trails. Please vote no on H.R. 7. A constituent from Gainesville, Prince William County, Virginia, where they have one of the longest daily commutes in America. I'm writing in opposition to the proposal to pay for any of H.R. 7 through cuts to federal workers' pay and benefits. I urge you to vote against any plan that unfairly targets federal workers and retirees to pay more for their fair share. Our nation's federal workers are already doing their part to address America's deficit problem, which they did not cause. Their pay freeze will have contributed over $60 billion to debt reduction. A constituent from Fairfax echoed those concerns. Congressman Conley, I'm contacting you about H.R. 7. I'm disgusted and appalled that those in public service are being targeted yet again to fix federal budget shortfalls they didn't cause. As a federal employee, I'm acutely aware of the shared sacrifices federal employees have made in these turbulent times. I appreciate your support and representation in defeating this bill. Madam Speaker, my constituents make a compelling case. Americans are looking for a long-term solution to transportation. Like any successful relationship, this one must be balanced with sustained investment in highways, transit, and non-motorized transportation. We can't slash funding in 45 of the 50 states, including my home state of Virginia, while eliminating all dedicated funding for transit and hope to solve our transportation problems. I urge my Republican colleagues, junk this bill, let's start over again and work in a bipartisan fashion for transportation in America for the benefit of all of our citizens. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, for 5 minutes.
Question unanimous consent to address the House for 5 minutes to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, for nearly a decade, the United States has invested money, sweat, blood, and tears all in the name of a free and democratic Iraq. Before the war, Iraqis suffered from the oppressive dictatorship of Saddam Hussein, and recent events have led me to believe that perhaps the new government does not value freedom any more than the last one did. As a member of Congress, I've been fortunate to go to Iraq several times to visit with our troops. And during my last visit with a bipartisan congressional district delegation, we also met with the Iraqi Prime Minister Maliki. During the 2-hour-long discussion covering many things, I asked one question: can we go see Camp Ashraf? Now, Madam Speaker, Camp Ashraf houses Iranian dissidents who are called the MEK. And I represent a good number of Iranian Americans who have family members in this camp. They are particularly worried at this point in time since Iraqi forces had recently killed 36 residents at the camp just a few weeks before. Here are the pictures of those real people that were killed by the Iraqi forces that came into the camp. Here's an example. You notice this is an American-made Humvee coming into the camp. And over here on this far picture, you see an Iraqi or an Iranian dissident being run over by one of those Humvees driven by an Iraqi soldier. So I asked the question, can we go see the camp and see these Iranian dissidents? And of course, Maliki said, no way that's going to happen. It left me wondering why he would refuse to let us see and talk to these people and get the other side of this invasion by the Iraqi soldiers. So we didn't get to go. And later I learned that one reason we were actually told to leave the country is because we asked to go see this camp and what happened to these 36 Iranian dissidents. And now we have Camp Liberty. Camp Liberty, Madam Speaker, is a result of the fact that in Camp Ashraf, the Iraqi government is moving these dissidents to another camp called Camp Liberty. These dissidents are commonly referred to as the MEK. And Camp Liberty, ironically, should be symbolic of a name of freedom, but it's anything but that. Now the Iraqi government, having moved these dissidents from Camp Ashraf to Camp Liberty, is still oppressing these Iranian dissidents. The reality is Camp Liberty is worse than Camp Ashraf. Former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani said it best. This isn't a jail, it's a concentration camp. Even in prisons, we allow lawyers to see their clients and their families to see their loved ones, but not in Camp Liberty. And remember, these people in Camp Liberty, these Iranian dissidents, have committed no crime. They have violated no law. You can't help but think, but good old Maliki has something to hide again. But word is leaking out that there's not enough drinking water in the camp, there are ruptures in the sewage system, and they're having to be fixed by hand by the residents. Iraqi guards have their will at the camp, and they wander around with no rules. They violate the privacy of these Iranian dissidents, many of whom are women. What's more, no one, not even the UN, that is confident that once political refugee determination is made by other countries, those countries will accept these dissidents into their country. Why? Because our State Department, incredibly, has the MEK, these folks in this Camp Liberty, designated as a foreign terrorist organization. In fact, Maliki told members of Congress one reason he treated the residents in Camp Ashraf so poorly is because our own State Department designates them as a foreign terrorist organization. This designation is an old, failed State Department foreign policy that designated these people as a favor to the Iranian government. That hadn't worked out too well with our foreign relations with Iran, has it? Since then, we've seen that the real terrorists in Iran are the extreme mullahs and the tiny tyrant of the desert, Ahmadinejad, not the opposition groups that want democracy in Iran. Both the EU and the United Kingdom have removed the foreign terrorist organization from the group, the MEK, but not the State Department. As Iran defiantly marches toward nuclear weapons, the best hope for the world is the people of Iran pushing for a regime change of their own government. The longer we keep opposition groups who want to do just that on the foreign terrorist organization list, the less likely it is that the light of liberty will have a chance to shine in Iran. The federal courts have even ordered the State Department to review this FTO designation, but the State Department continues to delay making a decision. The State Department must remove the MEK from the foreign terrorist organization list immediately, and then let liberty prevail in Camp Liberty and let these people leave Iraq in a peaceful manner. And that's just the way it is. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Woolsey, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, there was good news on the national security front last week. North Korea, one of the most dangerous rogue nations on earth, far more dangerous than Iraq. Iraq was when we invaded 9 years ago, has agreed to suspend nuclear weapons activity. Through careful diplomacy, the Obama administration has secured this concession by offering badly needed nutritional assistance to North Koreans. The North Korean regime has also consented to stop uranium enrichment, impose an important moratorium on long-range missile testing, and allow international weapons inspectors into the country for the first time in 3 years. Of course, we must remain cautious and we must remain vigilant in our dealings with North Korea. But it's clear that peaceful negotiations and diplomacy, as opposed to saber-rattling that we've seen much too often in the recent past, is advancing our national security interests and moving us closer to a future of peace and security. The President and Secretary Clinton deserve credit for this breakthrough. They have made non-proliferation and the securing of loose nuclear material top priorities. The New START Treaty represented a critical step in finally putting the Cold War behind us and increasing security cooperation between Russia and the United States. It's my hope now that we will be bolder and more ambitious, because it's time for the United States to exercise global leadership and true statesmanship and move toward complete dismantling of our nuclear arsenal. That's exactly the long-term goal we committed to as a nation when we signed the NPT 40 years ago. To that end, Madam Speaker, I've introduced a resolution called No Nukes, which stands for Non-Proliferation Options for Nuclear Understanding to Keep Everyone Safe. No Nukes. That No Nukes moves us aggressively in that direction. It makes no sense. It makes no sense at all that we have thousands of nuclear warheads when just one of them has the power to end life on Earth as we know it. And if that's not good enough, eliminating nuclear weapons isn't just a matter of human rights and moral urgency. It's also a big budget item at a time when we must be exercising fiscal restraint. We currently spend over $50 billion a year on maintenance of our existing nuclear arsenal. How about we invest that money on programs that save lives instead of weapons designed to destroy life? For nearly a decade now, we've defended our country and its interests by sending thousands of troops to die in a foreign war that isn't making America safer, but is costing Americans billions of dollars every month. Madam Speaker, there has to be a different way. My smart security platform advances the idea that we make the world safer, not through acts of war and arms escalation, but through cooperation and conflict resolution. For nearly my entire life, the world has lived under a shadow of nuclear confrontation. My oldest child turned 50 over the weekend. He was an infant in my arms during the terrifying days of the Cuban Missile Crisis. We can't make another generation go through that. Actually, my 7-year-old grandson, Jake Eddy, is joining me in Washington this week, and I believe it's our responsibility to make a promise to him and to his classmates and his peers. Our legacy to them must be a world free of nuclear weapons. Our legacy to them must be a peaceful future. And one step in the right direction, in the memory of Donald Payne,